Welcome to MGoRadio 10.5. Michigan is going to play the Washington Huskies in a rematch of the national championship game this weekend. In one sense, it is a rematch of the national championship game because it is literally that. In another sense, it is not that, because both of these teams are severely compromised from where they were a year ago. But first, I have a prior obligation, which anyway, I'm a little time crunch today. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do the UFR segment first, and then Alex and Seth will preview Washington. Apologies for all the readers who will miss my dulcet tones. But first, we want to thank Underground Printing. Rishi and Ryan invented podcasting, nay, the very concept of vocalized communication. And they have been our biggest supporters since they also invented writing. Gear up at ugpmichiganapparel.com or check out our selection on the mgoblogstore.com, which has a shirt with instructions for doing the Blues Brothers dance, except the instructions are on the front, so they can't help the other people in your section. We would also like to thank our associate sponsors: Peak Wealth Management, Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender, Human Element, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Royal Oath Insurance Company, Michigan Law Grad, Venue by 4M, Winewood Organics, Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning, Champion Circle, the Autograph app, and Signal Wire, where we are recording this. So we'll start off with the UFR review this week. Let's start with the offense because there's still a lot of questions with the offense.
Sure.
Yeah.
How are you feeling, Brian? Are you
Well,
sleeping?
so the thing is, I got through it and I added up all the numbers and I was like, that's a little weird. So the run blocking ticked up to almost our 2-to-1 positive ratio that we want. The UFR was, the RPS was a -1, which was a lot better than it felt live. But I'm still just left with a lot of questions about this offense that don't have answers. Like, I feel crazy sometimes because I'm like, I'm just a guy grading this on the internet. This is what I see. I can't understand it. And there's a few things that stand out. One, Evan Link is currently rated the worst pass blocking Power 5 tackle by Pro Football Focus, which we've all seen. And he's the worst run blocker on the team. All caveats about Pro Football Focus run block grading aside, I think it has the most fidelity when you're comparing players on the same team. And Link is bottom there. He's like 108th out of 118 Power 5 tackles as a run blocker. And I see that. You know, sometimes I've had disagreements with them, particularly about Trevor Keegan. And I think it's because they don't go as deep. But I don't think you have to go that deep to see that, you know, they're running an ISO play and Evan Link is fanning out to the right instead of scooping through a defensive tackle. Or he's pursuing a linebacker who's run himself out of the play because he's following a bash from Donovan Edwards, and then he doesn't get a block on that linebacker. There were so many major errors in this game that more than offset the positives that he did collect. He had another minus on a pass rush, and it just feels like with Jeffrey Percy coming in for Miles Hinton and performing reasonably well. I had him for like 4 run block positives, and I posted a bunch of them just to make sure that people could see that what I was doing was not just wish casting, that Jeffrey Percy was actually pretty good. Didn't give up a pressure and only something like 8 pass protection opportunities. And to me, at this point, it's time to make a switch. Will we see that switch? I don't know, because I would have said the same thing a week ago.
Yeah, I mean this is where it gets hard for us to go any further, right? Like there's a limit to what we can do. We chart it. We say like, here's what I'm seeing. Here's the play. Here's Jeff Percy's play in how many plays? 18 or so that you got to grade of him.
He had 24 snaps, but I didn't do 3 of them because they were the kneel downs at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Close enough anyway.
Yeah, so he's relevant on maybe like half of those, right? So, I mean, we have to acknowledge our limitations, right? There is only so much that we can tell. Obviously, they're seeing something in practice, or maybe it's just this is what's worrying me, and I see it a little bit on the defense too. Is maybe Michigan realizes that this is the year after the championship. This is not the year they're going to win anything, and who's going to come back next year? Who's going to be around down the line? Who can we get? meaningful snaps, and by the end of the season get up to that level. Because if you look at, Evan Link's eligibility versus Jeff Percy's eligibility, that's really the only spot that makes sense.
Well, but the problem there is that you also have Andrew Gentry, who's good enough to be a bonus OL, who's
Hmm.
good enough to look decent on those snaps, and literally cannot be worse than Link as a pass protector.
Right.
Like, literally cannot be worse. So it just feels kind of weird. It feels a little stubborn. And then, of course, the other thing won't be a surprise is that Michigan did not leverage Alex Orgy's legs in this game. They did not have a single called run for him. And I actually overestimated the number of actual runs he had in this game. The number was one.
Hmm.
No, sorry, there's two. It was two.
Well, the two zone reads, right?
Yeah, and on both of those, you see Michigan offensive linemen do things that they should not be doing because they're not used to repping it. So on one of them, Link is blocking a defensive tackle and leaves that defensive tackle for that linebacker who has no chance of making the play. And that defensive tackle is able to scrape over El Hadi and narrow the gap and then force Orgy into an unblocked guy outside of where Michigan wanted to run the ball. And on the other one, you see Dom Jadis hinge block on a counterplay, which is what you would do if you weren't running a zone read. But since you are running a zone read, what happens is you have a defensive end way up the field, and Jadis actually pursues him when that defensive tackle who you're blocking is being down blocked the other way, right? There's a counter on, and Michigan is blocking him. And they were blocking him into Orgy as soon as Jadis left. So that is an understandable thing for a center to do because he's just running the play that he's used to running. But in that context, it was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And it turned something that was either 6 or 7 yards or a chunk play into, I believe, 0. And I've been saying this all season, is that the time to install this stuff was in the spring. And it's clear that they did not. And it's clear that they haven't repped this enough for it to be particularly effective. They still have to try because they're putting Alex Orgy out that quarterback. And my grading for Alex Orgy in this game, negative 6.5. And I don't think anybody who watched the game would have much of a disagreement with that. Like a 43% downfield success rate. Just not a guy you can consistently move the ball with through the air. So if you're not able to run zone read stuff, if you're not able to have a consistent passing game, you have to have quarterback run in the offense, and you have to have a lot of it. And you have to be flinging Donovan Edwards out of the backfield and threatening that flare sweep and then running Alex Orgy the other way. And then you're at least at parity in the box. That's not going to be a panacea because Michigan has huge blocking issues. Jadis came in negative. Link came in negative. I thought the other guys actually did a pretty good job. But when you have holes on your offensive line the size of the holes that Michigan has, you're just not going to be consistent. The problem is that they're not getting explosives unless Khalil Mullings does something ridiculous. So to get more explosives, you have to run the quarterback. We saw that against Penn State in 22. If you actually make him a major part of the run game, people have to check up on him. We're getting a little bit of that here and there, but it's mostly defensive errors and not something that Michigan is inducing. So I was not happy with what we saw. Another under 300 yards in terms of that's another under 300-yard performance. We did see a step forward from Orgy. He had some downfield passes. He had his moments. But if this offense wants to work better this year, they can't be the JJ offense, and they have to be Georgia Tech. They have to be Rich Rod. They have to be a team that is first and foremost about running the quarterback and threatening to run the quarterback.
So here
There's
we
no
are.
way to get.
I mean, this is game 6, right? So we're gonna. I hear you, but what we're saying is and Crippen, I guess, was not available, right? He was injured.
Right, Crippen was out.
Yeah, so there's a possibility that he's just been dealing with something all year, and I don't know, right? We can't really fix center because we don't know what's going on there. But we're saying let's put a new right tackle in, and then let's rep all this new stuff. Because I think some of the problems in this game, or at least some of the problems Link had that you pointed out, were that he hasn't repped this stuff. So when he sees a linebacker running after the running back who's flying out the opposite direction, and doesn't realize he doesn't have to block that guy because the play call, because his reaction to Michigan having +1 in the box is, it makes sense, but he's never repped that. He's never seen a linebacker do that. He's used to linebackers or safeties coming at him because we don't do that, right?
Yeah, and it kind of reinforces that this style of running offense does make it easier because the linebackers are running the wrong direction, but it only makes it easier if you understand that. And they don't understand it, I think, as a team.
Yeah.
And there's no way to go fix that now. I mean, there's a bye week coming up next week, and maybe they just decide that, okay, this is what we got to do, and they rep it relentlessly for 2 weeks, and then they're better at it. But this is always going to be the Ohio State 2021 defense, where they replace Kerry Coombs midseason, and they're just trying to patch something together, and they can't really do it. Except that defense had a lot more talent than this offense has.
Yeah.
So pretty disappointed in everything that's happened. The only good thing is I predicted it once it started going haywire. So we've got that going for us.
Great.
Seth, what did you see on the other side of the ball?
All right, so I wanted to get into a Wink discussion because hours after I posted the last UFR after USC, he had that press conference, and then people were like tagging me, like, "Hey, Seth, hey, Wink's responding to you." He's not responding to me because I've been tracking blitz rates, and I just do it by how many guys cross the line of scrimmage, right? It's not,
right.
And so it has nothing to do with the things that he was talking about where. If you bring a linebacker and drop a defensive end, I call that a 4-man rush. I don't call that a blitz. Interesting thing about this game is that he was 79% 4-man rush. So it like the Minter level, which was the most extreme, was 71% in 2022, and he got up to like 78%. So this is actually more 4-man rush he was against Minnesota than Jesse Minter ever got to.
Well, and it felt like it, right?
Yeah.
Like, we had been complaining about, fancy formations and doing stuff on like marginal rundowns on 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 2. And this game had almost none of that. We had like one snap with Mason Graham at defensive end. I'm not sure I saw a zero coverage the whole game. And
yeah, they showed it a couple times, and that was it.
Right. So it kind of felt like we worked through the probabilities. And it was like, all right, so what happens if this team has to go 14 snaps to go score against Mason Graham and company? And this was a game without Josiah Stewart. It was a game without Will Johnson. And
with Arianti Ursary, right? Who nerfs our whole process here is, right, Michigan has 3 guys who can always rush even when they take out their 2 starters, they're going to have Rayshon Benny, they're going to have TJ Guy. And those guys can be not the same level as Josiah Stewart and Mason Graham, but fair, it's not going to be that big of a drop-off. You can still get pressure with those guys. When you're getting down into 30 snaps for Brandt, and then you have Ursary actually being able to take off the effectiveness of a TJ Guy, and TJ Guy gets tired because he's out there for 60 snaps, that's when you really saw it. And there were the first snaps I think we've seen in years where Michigan brings 5, and they get stopped. They get stopped by 5 offensive linemen, and the running back can actually go out in a pattern and gets a dump down. And there were a lot of plays where, like, he got the ball to his running back where if we just had that one more pass rusher, right, or Quinn Carroll wasn't allowed to set up 2 yards in the backfield every player, just some little bit that was going to allow Michigan to get the pass rush level that they've got, Max Brosmer is way less effective because most of his passes were actually dump downs. And that was like he's about to get sacked, and he just, he dumps it down to his running back. And then the other piece was Will Johnson's out. So it doesn't affect the game a lot. Amir Hall is fine. But there are 2 plays where there's one in particular where Amir Hall kind of slips, and then he misses the tackle. And the ball got there late, and it kind of wobbled a little bit in the air. And it's just, I've seen Will Johnson enough. That was a pick 6 if it was thrown to Will Johnson. But it wasn't Will Johnson out there. So you take 2 more All-Americans off this defense, and it comes down a bit. And it's still, they got mostly 3-and-outs. The one long drive they had that wasn't a 2-minute drill was extended by what I thought was one of the worst calls I've ever seen, the hands to the face call. And, the other points they got were, a couple 2-minute drills, right? They get the ball with 4.5 left, and they just need to. And Michigan was backing off, and they had some interesting ideas. There was
right. They're up 10. They're up 10 at that point, right? So
Yeah.
the play is to bleed them down the field.
Yeah, and they're dropping 3, and it's like, okay, we're dropping 3 on 4th and 6, and that was one of the complaints I saw online.
Dropping 8, you mean?
Yeah, well, no, dropping 3 guys deep. So they're in a
Right.
3 deep shell, and they have Makari Page over the on 4th and 6. They have Makari over the slot receiver, who's Jackson, who's their best receiver, right? And then Jackson goes and runs a quick little stop route, and they hit him for 6 yards. But when I look back at it, Jayshon Barham is coming from the very snap. He's trying to get out there. I think it was a trap. I think the idea was to show them that, right? Give him that look and get Barham over there, because Barham's only an inch and he has to go through the umpire.
Oh, yeah. Well, and like his path is not ideal.
Yeah.
Like that play call was fine. Like I had no problem with that. Like, if Barham plays it a little bit better, it's a PBU.
Yeah.
The only thing that really kind of they sent 6 guys and they managed to get a chunk play off of that kind of, and I was like, but you get one of those in a game, that's better than par for the course. So it kind of feels like, he's dialed it back. He's I don't know if he's necessarily listened to the criticisms, but it's possible that he just kind of looked at it and came to this conclusion on his own, because he doesn't seem like a guy who's onboarding a lot of Twitter talk.
Clearly not. If his interpretation of stats that people are throwing out there is that he's bringing the middle linebacker and bringing the nickel and whatnot. He did bring the nickel a couple times. They got bit by it one time. I don't like people have downloaded this about Michigan, that he's going to blitz the nickel no matter where he is, and Zeke Berry's a good blitzer and he gets there fast. And one time he actually was relevant to that play, but most of the time he's coming from so far away.
Oh God, yeah, he's like blitzing from Mongolia, and you're like, what? I mean, what was the purpose of that?
Right. And so I get wanting to, you have to change that up, because they get other plays where it looks like he's blitzing, and then they throw a screen out there, and he's just like, boop, I took your screen. And those plays are. Can we talk about Jair Hill now? Because
sure,
he's there. I was gonna wait one more week. I was like, okay, let's.
We gotta wait. We gotta wait. We gotta see him tackle in space.
He did.
Like not in the backfield.
Okay.
After like 5 or 10 yards, when he's got to break down and tackle a guy who's got some momentum. Jumping a screen is great, but that's a different skill.
Here's the thing. I was doing my break. I was going through the plays on Monday night. And in my other screen, I've got the Lions Monday Night Football game. And Devin Witherspoon misses a tackle exactly like Jair Hill doesn't. And that's our comp for him, right? He's Devin Witherspoon. He's young Devin Witherspoon. And I was like, okay, that's the kind of player he is. He's not a big guy. And I'm not going to wait till next year when he's making that interception he had. You've seen that play a million times. And usually that cornerback is like in oh-no mode, right? And he just smoothly, he makes up the ground, he turns around, he boxes out the receiver, and then the way he has that receiver boxed out, there's no way for him to make a catch. Even if he makes the catch, even if he plucks it over the cornerback, even if Jair Hill bounces it up to that guy, he's falling out of bounds. So he's completely zeroed out any opportunity for a catch, and the only thing that can happen is a PBU interception. And it's like, that's so perfectly played. And it's not just talent. He's getting the timing down now. And then the screens, I mean, how many screens has he blown up now? And he's doing it from like 12 yards deep, which is...
That's a little bit of exaggeration.
Well, okay, the end around, he was 14 yards. He was in a deep cover 3 on the end around. And he gets help because Derek Moore is the one who kind of shoots up. I actually gave that an RPS -2 because they're cracking the defensive end, and Michigan's blitzing the nickel. So the path that Zeke Berry takes him inside of the running back. He has no chance of getting to the running back. So the quarterback has taken out one guy. And then they're playing a cover 3, so they're rolling a safety down who's going to have to come through all the, all that trash. And then the other person on that side is Jair Hill. Jair Hill sees it and jets past that kick-out blocker who's coming for him. And, I mean, the angles he takes, and he did this on another play too, he comes way outside so the guy doesn't have a chance. And then as soon as he knows he's past him, he just takes a step, and it's so smooth. And now he's, 3 yards further inside, and it just takes away all the space. It's a level of athleticism that I see sometimes from Alabama guys and Ohio State guys, like the 5 stars. And that's what he is. He's a 5-star talent, and he came in small, and he was playing free safety in high school, and I think Jair Hill is now one of the stars of this defense.
All right. Anything else you need to get off your chest?
So I wanted to talk about and I didn't get to talk about it. I was so tired when I was writing it. I forgot to get into it. The difference between Barham and Houseman, because you hear the coaches talk about how Houseman's like such a leader and they love what he's doing, and then when I go watch the plays, Houseman is doing the thing that we used to hate from Obi. I hate using Obi and Mouton all the time, but like where he sits back and waits, right? But when in the context of this defense, he's got Mason Graham in front of him taking on a double, and he waits a little too long, and the guy can come off the double and get a hit on Houseman, and Houseman's not big. And so, you got a big gap in front of you. Why don't you just shoot that gap and take out the running back? But in the context of this defense, they're trying to play it safe, right? They're trying to let Mason Graham make the play. They're trying to let the defensive lineman get over, and then the linebacker is kind of your safety. He's their last line of defense. And that's how they want them to play, even if it sometimes gets, him blocked a little bit. And then Barham is just such a versatile talent. You can see he's exactly the kind of player they want. But, you mentioned he doesn't take a good path on the 4th and 6. He sometimes gets caught by a block because he jumps to the wrong side of one. He takes gambles that they don't want. And he's the one the wording that they're using to talk about him is, he's really starting to embrace what we're doing here. He's really starting to get the defense, which is coach speak for he wasn't doing all the things we asked him to do, and we got to coach some Maryland out of this guy. And I'm seeing it. It's a very interesting contrast where Houseman is kind of your calm, easy, maybe you want him to be a little bit more aggressive guy, and then Barham is this just big monster who when he hits a guard, that guy flies back 2 yards. He doesn't even, he's out of the blocking scheme at that point. But both of these guys, they're kind of slowly rounding into the players they want them to be, so I think you're going to have 2 of the best linebackers in the country at the end of the year, but we're still watching the growing pains, and I think we underestimated how much Maryland was still in Barham's game when he came in here.
All right, we're going to take a break, come back, and then Alex and Seth will guide you through the Washington preview.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original, starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenience stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
This is the University of Michigan.
Stay tuned for Gus, but first, it's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with peak confidence. Learn more at peakwm.com/mgoblog. Oftentimes, people will ask me exactly what do we do here at Peak Wealth. Well, you already know we make killer spreadsheets. You already know my voice kind of sucks for radio, but you might not know that we approach Roth conversion.
Enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
Also, one more thing you might want to know what we don't do. We don't go on Netflix dressed up like morons and hide from the camera like Brohio. Gus, what's the down and distance?
3rd and 5. Stroud in trouble. Stroud is sacked again.
Hi, this is Pete with Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning. You've probably noticed that we're terrible about keeping our podcast ads up to date and topical to Michigan sports. Probably because we're so busy doing preventative maintenance for all of our many happy customers. We know no one is excited to call their HVAC contractor, and to make that day as frequent as possible, you should regularly maintenance your system. Call us or text us to find out more about the benefits of our preventative maintenance plans, including savings on service calls and priority scheduling. Whatever the season, we want you to be comfortable for that next glorious Michigan victory.
Need help with insurance? Well, longtime MGO blog supporter Owen Rosen is back at his new insurance brokerage, Royal Oath Insurance Group. Owen might not be the knowledge, but he and his team have the life, business, car, and home insurance knowledge you need. Based in Michigan, but they can also help in other states too, you can call or text Owen today at 586-229-1026 or visit Royal Oath, that's OATH, insurance.com.
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages
approximately $100,000.
It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.5. Brian has gone to deal with another issue, and so you got myself and Alex Drain, who are going to preview the Washington Huskies, who are not the Washington Huskies of last year.
But they're still a pretty good team. This is going to be an interesting test. I think the 3-2 record doesn't match the caliber of this team. I think they should be better than 3-2. They lost a couple games due to shooting themselves in the foot, which is a theme for them, but the talent here is pretty good. And I think through 5 games of this new regime, pretty impressed with what they've been able to do, certainly on this offense.
So put that in context for me. What would they look like against Texas or USC?
Well, I think that they're pretty different than Texas because of the offensive line, and that's going to majorly color this matchup. I think compared to USC, there's quite a bit of similarity in that you have a team with a pretty decent quarterback, some weapons. I think USC was probably stronger at receiver, Washington stronger at running back, but they've got some players. It's just how much is this OL going to hold them back? And so far this year, they've been able to gain a lot of yards. They've had trouble translating those yards into points, but they've definitely been able to move the ball down to down. And I think that's pretty impressive considering what they're dealing with on that offensive line.
And so what's the trick? Give me your standard Washington play. Is it Will Rogers just hitting Denzel Boston, or what are they doing that makes them so effective?
Well, they do a lot of quick passing as a whole. I think Will Rogers has shown a good ability to figure out where he needs to go with the ball and get it out before the pass protection breaks down. I think he reads the play pre-snap pretty well. They use their different receivers well to do that. They flip it out in the flat to Jonah Coleman. They check it down to the tight end, Kalike Latu. They've got a bunch of options to try and avoid the ticking time bomb that is the offensive line. That's allowed them to move the ball, but then they do run into some issues in the red zone, and they don't really have that short yardage ability to impose on teams.
All right, so before we'll get into all the guys, but how are you attacking this team if you're Michigan then? Bringing the safeties down? Because that seems to be, if you're saying they're a team that has problems in the red zone, that's the kind of team you want to pressure, right?
Yeah, my only worry there is Denzel Boston is a deep threat. So when they're moving it down the field, I don't want to get burned over the top. The biggest thing is going to be just another game of if our defensive line is wrecking them in the trenches, don't get crazy. You don't need to dial up a bunch of blitzes and things, because I think they'll be able to get pressure pretty routinely in this game. You look at this offensive line, and it was pretty foreseeable coming into the year that this was going to be an issue. You've got a left tackle in Maximus McCree, who has spent most of his time at Iowa Central Community College. He had a brief stopover in 2022 at Maryland. Then he went back to the community college. He's hanging in there best he can, but he's not very good. Their other tackle is Drew Party from San Jose State. He is definitely not good. You get a guard, Enoch Vimahi from Ohio State, who never really played there, couldn't get on the field. Down transfers essentially to Washington. Their center is from Portland State. So only that left guard is a guy that was on the team last year. It's just a really patchwork. Oh, well, and you watch
Wait a minute, if you're going to say all the names of the guard of the entire offensive line, you can't leave out the guard whose name is literally Guard.
Yeah, who is named Guard, Gaard, Guard Memelar with two A's at the end. So it's a hodgepodge OL, and I think that was clear coming into the year. But thus far, it hasn't been as much of a limiting factor as I expected. They've been able to rack up yardage. You look at their results to date. They had 482 yards against Weber State. Who cares about that? But 501 yards against DMU. Okay. 452 against Washington State. 391 against Northwestern. And I think Northwestern's a pretty good defensive team. Their offense is a nuclear catastrophe, but they can defend a decent bit. And then Rutgers is a team that we generally think has a solid defense. 521 yards. So this is a team that's been able to move the ball down to down despite that offensive line situation. I think it starts with having a good quarterback. And Will Rogers, yeah, maybe not elite, but he's a pretty good player. And he showed that when he was in the SEC at Washington State under Mike Leach, and then the successor last year.
Mississippi State.
And,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Mississippi State. And he's mostly a pocket passer. His rushing yards in his career are not very good, but he did actually show a couple scrambles in the game I charted against Northwestern, and that's useful when you have pressure breaking down. He spun out of a sack and ran and picked up 3 or 4 yards, and if he can do that, that'll definitely help because there will be pressure in his face, and he's handled the pressure well, delivers the ball pretty accurately, hasn't thrown an interception this season. I think he's at 75% completion through 5 games. So that's pretty good, and that was the first task that Jed had to do when he came in. Will Rogers was committed under Kalen DeBoer to be the successor to Mike Penix. Then everything changes with the coaching staff, but Jed was able to come in pretty quickly, nail down that commitment, keep him on board, and it's paid dividends for this offense. But really the second piece is Jonah Coleman, the running back.
Yeah, I mean, what are we looking at with him? Because he's listed at 5'9", 229.
He's not tall, but he's muscly, but he's got some acceleration. He's got really good vision. He's graded in PFF's grading as one of the top running backs in the country. It's a good year for running backs in the Big Ten because obviously we have Kalel Mullings, Iowa's guy. Caleb Johnson's really come online this year. Ohio State has Quinshon Judkins, but I think Jonah Coleman's right up there with those guys. He was the kind of player you watch this game I charted against Northwestern, and I don't have anything against Cameron Davis or Adam Mohammed, the backups, but it's just one of those things where you notice when Jonah Coleman is on the field and you notice when he isn't, because he has that burst, he has that power when he runs. His vision is better than those other guys. I mean, he hurdled a fool, which I think you would be excited about.
Oh yes,
in the in the Northwestern game. He tried it again later and didn't pull it off, but the dude can just play, and he makes gains out of nothing, which is really useful when you have an offensive line that's got problems. He can catch the ball in space and make a guy miss. He's a really good player, and having that ability to cover up some of the issues up front has been really big at keeping this offense on schedule. And he's definitely the most dangerous weapon, and tackling him in the open field will be very interesting for this Michigan team to handle.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back to the defensive UFR, that was Taylor's another a player that Minnesota had a really good running back as well, and they struggled to tackle him sometimes, and it was just because he's a good player, and so that's they throw it to him a lot in the flat, right? They're going to have Michigan's going to try to have their linebackers take care of that guy, and also I think they throw a lot of dump offs, right? Like that's been Will Rogers' safety valve is Jonah Coleman will just go out underneath and grab it, and then he can get a couple of yards making somebody miss. So it's something to keep an eye on, I think, as far as where our linebackers are dropping to, whether they're for some reason, the Washington Huskies have had a lot of 2-minute drills this year. Just the nature of the games they played and everything's been close and whatnot. But it's been my interpretation that, like, one of the reasons they were able to keep on moving the ball was dumping it down to the running back. And then that exact same thing happened to Michigan last week, right, where they had 2 long 2-minute drills. And that was kind of where the yards were leaking because they were moving their guys back and having the linebacker sit back on it. And then if that guy misses a tackle, all of a sudden, your 3rd and 4 becomes a first down, and they're moving still.
Yeah, I mean, they do short passing because they have to get it out quickly. Part of that is screens to our old friend Giles Jackson, the slot receiver on this team. I'm happy for Giles that he's finally getting real usage as a real receiver, but I still don't think he's like a major star. The big story for them is the wide receiver Denzel Boston. You come into this year, they lost so much talent at receiver versus that team last year that had Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan. But Boston was a guy that was on the bench waiting his turn. And you came into this year thinking they might not have the weapons at wide receiver, but he's popped a little bit. 6'4", 209 pounds. He caught a deep ball for a touchdown against Northwestern. He caught a jump ball in the end zone for a touchdown against Northwestern. The stats look really good at this point in time for him. And that's going to be interesting, but I think Michigan's decently well set up to handle that just because they have Will Johnson. But 412 yards, 7 touchdowns through 5 games. Nice start to the year for him. So I think ultimately when you look at this matchup, it's going to come down to Michigan's ability to whip that offensive line and really create problems for Will Rogers. Being able to bottle up Coleman, you might have to use 2 guys to bring him down or ultimately wrap him up. But they have the personnel to slow this team down. It's just a matter of can they do it? Can they avoid giving up a big play? Because the Washington, eventually, the longer you make them do it, the more they wear down. They struggled to convert touchdowns in the red zone, and they put the field goal unit on the field. The field goal kicker misses the kicks. It's been a problem. They have penalty issues. They move it well for periods of time, and then it breaks down. If you can slow down their amount of time moving the ball, which is very plausible because Michigan's by far the best defense I think they'll have seen, then they can hold this team to a shorter amount of points. But they're also good enough that if you make some errors, they can take advantage. So we'll see what happens. I don't expect Washington to score a ton of touchdowns in this game, but they're a real offense, and I think they will have some success in this one because they've got enough weapons. They have a good enough quarterback, and they've got a smart enough coach. So this will be an interesting test.
Last question for the offense, then we'll go to defense. Will Rogers is a runner. Is he a threat? Does he get outside? Is he going to bowl you over? Like, what is he?
Just the scrambles, and the scrambles aren't very much, but they're useful because if he can spin out of a sack and pick up 4 yards, it keeps him on schedule. But no, he has negative career rushing yards. He was way in the negative in his career at Mississippi State. He's not very quick. It's not. Maybe they'll call a zone read to
just to like stick a knife into us.
Like when the Lions do it, twice a year with Jared Goff. You never know. Maybe it'll be good because this is a marquee game for them. But no, it's not a major thing on the scouting report.
All right, I hear you. All right, we're going to take a break and come back and talk about defense.
Mullings dragging Trojans. Broke free. Mullings dragging Trojans. Dragging Trojans. Dragging Trojans.
It's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. Learn how to retire with peak confidence at peakwm.com/mgoblog. A lot of people don't realize we have a special arrangement with the University 401, 403, 457 retirement plan. If you're a university employee or even a former university employee, you can add us as your advisor to your account. And my bet is that we can help you optimize your situation, especially when it comes to taking advantage of the mega backdoor Roth option with the 457. If you're highly compensated, I can show you a way to contribute over $60,000 per year to the university plan.
Mullings dragging Trojans. Broke free. Mullings in the clear. It's a foot race. He'll get tracked down, but he comes up with the biggest play of the day.
I can't believe I'm doing this. If you find yourself in the penalty box, you want a Michigan man arguing your case, call criminal law attorney and former prosecutor Jonathan Paul tonight It's 248-924-9458. Or visit his old website at MichiganLogRad.com. Winewood Organics is Ann Arbor's only cannabis microbusiness. It's a place where plants are grown in living soil, where nearly every product is made, mixed, trimmed, and packed by hand, where first-time customers save 25% on everything from old-school hash to live resin carts. You can find them just west of downtown or at winewoodorganics.com. Winewood Organics, a place where the weed is better.
Jake Butt here, guys, live down from the National Championship Convention Center down in Houston, and we got some big-time news for you guys, Michigan faithful. We need your help to keep our team. Last year, Champion Circle launched the One More Year Fund to support key players coming back, like Blake Corum, Trevor Keegan, and Zach Sinner, who elected to return to Michigan for one more year. Now we're launching the Those Who Stay NIL campaign. Our rivals are coming after many of our key players, trying to induce them to leave Michigan. It's time for the Michigan family to show our players how much we appreciate them and want them back in the maize and blue. To keep the momentum going, head over to thosewhostayuofm.com. Again, that is thosewhostayuofm.com to support. Go Blue.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenient stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
So long since I saw your face.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.5. We continue our Washington preview with their defense. And Alex, you had a hard time finding a team to watch them against, didn't you?
Well, not necessarily hard. It's just more acceptance of reality, shall we say. In the past, when I would go to do these pieces, you always look for the opponent. It was like, okay, we're playing Indiana. We got to find the tape of when they played Ohio State. We got to find the tape when they played Penn State. And now it's downgrading offensive expectations. And you look at a team like this. And, well, last week I was like, oh, wow, Minnesota played Iowa most recently. That's perfect. That's our thing this year.
Except Iowa's offense is better than ours, so.
Yeah, and then this week it's like, okay, so they got 3 power conference sort of teams. Wazoo, definitely better offense than Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Northwestern, that's the one that's definitely worse. And then you get Rutgers in between, and it's like, that one is just right. Last week we were Iowa, this week we're Rutgers. So welcome to 2024, I guess.
All right, so how did these guys look against Rutgers?
You know, I thought they were okay. It was a weird game. It was kind of a drought or sort of drowning in water thing for the Rutgers offense, because they had, I think, 7 drives that were either 3 and out or first down and out. And they had 3 touchdown drives that lasted 10, 10, and 15 plays. They had no drives that were longer than 4 plays and less than 10 plays. It was either it was all working or nothing was working for them. And honestly, that might not be a bad model for Michigan, because I do think that this defense looks competent enough that we're probably going to get that period of that Minnesota game we had last week where it was just 3 and out, punt, 3 and out, punt, and it's just kind of a slog. And frankly, I was surprised by that, because you come into this season, I was looking at the depth chart. I wasn't a big fan of Washington's defense last year, and I was projecting it out and seeing who they had on the roster. And there were some transfers they brought in, but also a lot of the guys were just the backups from last year. And I was like, man, I didn't like that defense last year. Now the starters leave and they're playing the backups. This is going to be really bad. And so far it hasn't been. Now, maybe they haven't played Ohio State, but that's not relevant for Michigan. And these guys looked good enough that they could hang in there against Rutgers. And they did a good job against the run for the most part. The issue was the long run, and that's kind of where the game turned, and that's going to be the story, I think, tomorrow night. But they were pretty aggressive against the run. It's nominally a 4-2-5 defense, but they lined up Alfonso Tuputala, who is one of the only returning starters off last year's defense. They lined him up down on the line quite a bit, and that created kind of a 5-man front sort of thing. And I think that's what they're going to do against Michigan.
Yeah, I was actually reading some of the the discussions because they're using Steve Belichick from that Belichick, right, as their defensive coordinator. And Belichick's obviously brought a whole bunch of things from his dad to this defense, and one of them, because they were he's coming from the Patriots, so what they call that position is the Uche. So I was just like, oh, we know what that is. And then the Cameron Fabricoulian, they've been calling his position the Peppers, because that's what those two guys are doing he's been translating terms which he considers Patriots terms, and Michigan fans are like, oh yeah, that's we know exactly who those guys are.
And the thing is that Tuputala last year played inside linebacker. He was a starter. I think he was at will last year next to Edifuan Ulofosio.
Yeah.
But this year, in this game, he's playing more of an edge sort of thing, rushing the passer quite a bit.
Which I think is a good use for him, because I think our issue with him last year is that he was not very good at reading what was going on in front of him. For example, when he completely jumps out of his lane on one of Donovan Edwards' touchdowns.
Yeah, it was an issue for their linebackers last year, so it's maybe better utilization of him. And that gives you kind of a 5-man look, because they've got the two defensive tackles, probably going to be Jacob Bandas and Sebastian Valdez in this game. Javon Parker, who's a Detroit native, unfortunately got injured in the Rutgers game. It sounds like he's out for the year, which that's a bummer, because I actually like Javon Parker. I liked him last year, too. When I watched him, he thought he had a little bit of get off. But those other two guys were fine enough that they should be able to hang in there. And then they've got a big, strong side end who's 282 pounds. And then that other edge spot, they can really do anything they want with it. Deshaun Lynch is 292 pounds. And Isaiah Ward, who came with Jed from Arizona, is 227 pounds. And then you've got guys in the middle like Jaden Wayne, who's 262 pounds, and Zach Durfee, who's questionable for this game, 256 pounds. So they can do anything they want at that other edge spot. They can make it basically a tackle. They can make it basically a linebacker. And it gives them some flexibility to do what they want to do there.
Yeah, they also like to use Lance Holtzclaw. Like I said, I've been there's a lot of good information out there on their defense and how they like to use these guys. And Holtzclaw is the guy that they like to put out there when teams go 2 tight ends, because he's a kind of a tight end race. Now, he's not going to match with Max Bredesen, right? But teams are starting to try to find guys. Now, he's 6'3", 224, but they're trying to find guys who are kind of in that 6'4", 6'5" range, and in the 230 to match up with tight ends, to be a little bit of a safety tight end kind of guy. Different version of a hybrid than we're used to thinking of. Penn State, Kent Sullivan maybe was his name. Penn State used to have a guy like that too. But you mentioned Butler and his brothers. You mentioned Parker, his brothers out as well. Bryce Butler is supposed to return. He's supposed to be their backup defensive tackle, but he's been injured as well. So, you mentioned these guys were the backups last year, and when you look at the articles that they're writing and the things that Washington fans are saying, they've been concerned about the defensive tackle spot for a long time. Now, I don't know if Michigan's the team that's going to take advantage of that, but like when you ask them what's the problem with their defense, or where they worry about their defense, it's really they think that the defensive tackles, they've had Jacob Bandas forever. He was a top 250 player, but he's been a backup his entire career, and it's his 6th year now. Tanufi, he played a little bit last year and was fine. Valdez, they've been it was down a transfer from where was it again? Like Portland State or something? Or no, he's not.
I think it was Sacramento. I think it was Sacramento State, maybe.
Yeah. So they have all these guys who are just guys and haven't been playing for different reasons. They also, you like Carson Bruner a lot, but then Carson Bruner, the thing they say about him is he's a small line. He's like an NFL style linebacker. He's small.
Yeah, I think first of all with the defensive tackles, and we're talking about them being concerned, I was concerned coming into this game and this season that we go back to last year national championship game. I thought their defensive tackles were really quite bad, and that created problems that Michigan was able to run on them. And now you graduate those guys, you bring the backups in, a couple FCS transfers. I'm like, man, these guys, they're going to get blocked and they're going to end up 15 yards downfield. But they weren't against Rutgers. They were hanging in there as best they can. And again, maybe it'd be relevant if Michigan still had Zach Zinner. But this season, we've seen that there's really one reliable road grader, and he's dinged up in this game. Maybe he'll play, maybe he won't, in Miles Hinton. So I don't even know if they can take advantage of that, if there is a vulnerability. As for Bruner, he was the third linebacker last year. He played a bit. I thought he really was not very good when I saw him against Texas, but they had some issues in that game, obviously. This season, I thought he played pretty decently. Now, he isn't big, as he said, 226, but he has a lot of responsibility put on him, because if they're playing a 5-1 or in some cases 5-2, rolling the safety down, he's the guy that has to handle quite a bit. You get this front up front. If the running back gets through, he's one of the only guys that can stop it, and he did a decent job at that. They also blitz him from the second level from time to time. He also has to cover tight ends. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate, and he does a decent job with it. So that was enough reason for me to put the star on him. PFF's been a huge fan of his for many seasons now.
Yeah.
But he has a big role in this defense, and you see that in this game where they're generally able to bottle Rutgers up consistently, but they give up a 40-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter that was really the back-breaking play. That was the game-winning score, and that's the vulnerability. I mean, we remember this with the Kenneth Walker game, right? You play 5-1, the running back gets through, you have a linebacker who can stop it from being a big gain, and then you have maybe a one safety who's got a shot to stop it from being 6, and this is where it's relevant, because Cameron Broussard, their deep safety, is maybe their worst tackler. And that is where things went from bad to worse. He's the guy that blows the tackle on that 40-yard touchdown run. They also had a different 40-yard run where he blows a tackle. We've seen Kalel Mullings be able to break tackles. If Michigan can get him through on just a couple plays, you may not need that many times of doing it to break one and take it a long way for a touchdown. That could swing the game. So that's something to watch.
That's certainly where I came away, where, I am not predicting a Michigan win here, but I think the path for a Michigan win is being able to blow those defensive tackles off the line, get down to that linebacker. And, against Rutgers, Kyle Monangai, they get the ball under their old goalpost. They hand it to Monangai, and all of a sudden he just, has a beast mode run, right? And you see that, and okay, you excited about it, Monangai for a moment, that's a good running back, but we've got one of those too, right? So the path for Michigan doing something against these guys is, like you said, get Mullings out against them, get one of their maybe get someone to step the wrong way, or just blow one of the defensive tackles off the line of scrimmage, and get Mullings out into that secondary or against a small linebacker, and then he's just breaking tackles. And like you said, those runs, even if because the question is what happens with Washington. The context of their games matter, because they're putting up a lot of yards, and they are the 25th to S&P. They're the 25th team in the country, so it's not a bad defense to them either, right? So
no.
Their down numbers are really good. When they fall apart really badly, and it's those moments that are just backbreaking. You've got them backed up on the 1 yard line, and then you give up a monster run, and there is a thing as momentum in college football, right? We saw this again against Minnesota. The momentum was with Michigan, and things start happening for us, and the momentum goes to Minnesota, and then they get the ball in the red zone, and Michigan plays terribly, and they have a bunch of mistakes on that one drive that are not common for Michigan to make. It happens in college football, and I see that's where Michigan really needs to be able. If Michigan's going to do anything against them, it's those big back-breaking plays, which we've seen them have against USC. We saw them have it against Minnesota. We've seen that this team is absolutely capable of that, and I think that's our path, especially when you say, Cameron Broussard. Where's he from again?
I think he's a Sacramento State. I think Valdez was a Montana guy. I don't know. They're all from these Western FCS schools. So
right. Schools that now the Mountain West is looking at. And then they also have Jordan Shaw. We didn't talk about him at all. He's an Indiana transfer playing nickel, and they move him in out with a more pure nickel in Dyson McCutcheon, who we saw a little bit last year.
I think both those guys are pretty solid. I mean, I think when you look at this team, I don't know how relevant passing is going to be facing Michigan, but I saw decent enough. Actually, honestly, watching that game, I think Cali McManus has made a little progress. He's not great, but he was better than the just disaster that he was last year for Minnesota, because they played early in that game a lot of cover one, and they would get Rutgers in like a 3rd and 10, and I think they were just thinking, look, we don't respect Cali McManus, we don't respect Rutgers' skill positions. We're going to pin our ears back, try to get him, and just play man behind it. And Rutgers was able to handle it. Cali McManus stood in there, throws the ball right before he gets hit. It was accurate, which is rare for him. And Rutgers, they dialed up well, right? They go to mesh, they go to different man beater concepts, and they were converting 3rd and longs to keep drives, the drives they sustain. Second half, Washington's like, okay, we're done doing that. We're going to play too high on passing downs. We're going to, slink back. And I think they had better success. I'd expect them to go back to the man against Michigan, right? I mean,
yeah, of course.
You don't really respect what Michigan's got, and Rutgers scores a touchdown on a beautiful fade by Cali McManus and just a great jump ball catch in the end zone. That doesn't feel super replicable for Michigan unless it's being thrown to Loveland, and even then, I don't know if Orji can make that throw. So I expect them to go back to the man stuff, and they do blitz a lot because, first of all, they play a 5-man front quite a bit, so that's 5 rushers on a number of plays for one. And then they do blitz Bruner from the second level. They do some, different drop guys, rush other guys, and they got through against Cali McManus. I expect they'll get through against Michigan some. And their cover corners looked okay. Their nickel looked okay. I mean, when they were getting beat, they weren't getting beat by much. They were tight windows, and Cali McManus did enough to keep the chains moving. So I think this is an impressive defense given the context, right? Like, that's my biggest thing. And I think looking at this team, offense, defense, if we're taking stock of a new coaching staff, I think there's a lot of good indicators here. Like, the penalty stuff is bad. It needs to get cleaned up. It's also a new team. It's also a team that doesn't have a lot of experience, new pieces fitting together. But given their constraints, the lack of talent they had at positions on defense, the utter lack of talent on offensive line, to be top 25-ish in offense and top 25-ish in defense, it's impressive. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about what Jed's been able to do, and Steve Belichick as well with this team.
All right, and special teams thoughts. We mentioned Denzel Boston is their is their best receiver. He's been getting. That's the one piece that I had, is that he's been getting to punts. So he's got an 86% catch rate, which leads the Big Ten. And that we've seen how important that is, right? With Peppers and with Donovan Peoples-Jones in the past. Like, Michigan's been able to get hidden yardage when they have a guy who can get to those punts. And then, you mentioned the kicking. What's happened to Grady Gross?
I don't know. It's very interesting because Gross was a pretty good kicker last year. Right? He was the one that made the kick to defeat Oregon in the regular season matchup between those two teams. And this year, just not happening for him. He missed a really makeable field goal against Rutgers. Then he missed a long one at the buzzer, which, okay, that's fine. But it's been a recurring theme that he's pretty wobbly at the moment. I don't know if what's going to happen if he can get it right at some point. But that's a story, because they don't convert yards to touchdowns well enough. And when your field goal kicker isn't making it either, you're in trouble. And it's been trouble for them. It's just the little things have cost them in close games, and I think Michigan has to hope that continues for one more week at least.
And then the last piece is their punter, Jack McAllister, who returns from last year as well, has been giving up a lot of returns this year, 53% return rate, 4th worst in the Big Ten. And, like I said, that's something we watch because that's, one of those things in special teams that kind of create the hidden yardage. Teams are, he's punting them low. He punts them far, but he punts them low, and teams get returns. And I don't know if Michigan's maybe trying to plan on setting something up. Any insight on him or?
No, not really. I'm not a special teams analyst, but
I took a bath in it this week because I was like, what do I do for neck Sharpies? And I was like, let's do the block punt. And of course that led me down a wormhole of special teams, but they're ranked 78th in FEI. And I think some other indicators they're like in the 120s. So obviously that's Grady Gross missing his field goals, and against Rutgers they had a penalty that negated a missed field goal and actually put Rutgers back on the field again. So,
and Rutgers scored a touchdown on the very next play.
So, I mean, that's part of that's one of the themes about, and this is the midseason, so they're not going to be as bad they were maybe earlier in the season, but this is still a team, as you mentioned, that everyone's still wearing name tags, starting to get and those teams tend to make more mistakes and get less out of what they have, just because that's the nature of the beast when you're playing a lot of new players. Michigan's aware of this too. Predictions.
Oh man, this is going to be an interesting game. I think it's going to be close. Washington's a better, well-rounded team than Michigan, but Michigan has this trump card they can play in these kinds of games, that we have this defensive line that can just wreck your offense. I think it'll drag it into the mud. It'll probably be low scoring. I think there will be some turnovers. I think I'll probably go Washington like 20-17, maybe 17-14, something like that. But it's going to be tight, and it'll be interesting. We'll get to see how this Michigan team and Orgy respond when you're in a road stadium where it's loud, it's rocking. I think that'll be the difference, but Michigan could easily win the game too. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've been saying 17-15. But I as a Xennial, like who was in school in the 2000s when we had that series, I recognize how big field goals are in this series. So, they got Grady Gross, we got Zavada. So maybe we'll be the 17. But I think it's 17-15. Washington was my guess. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, you've been doing a whole series on the hockey team, so I wanted to get your thoughts on what to expect, because we might be watching hockey very soon. All right.
Maize and Blue Nation, it's Tom Brady. I founded Autograph with one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. That's why I'm excited to announce the official launch of the Autograph app, the app that gives diehard Wolverine fans like you a one-stop shop for your Michigan fandom. Autograph has all the best Michigan content in one place and rewards you for all the things you're already doing as a fan, like listening to this podcast. It's time to feed your fandom with the Autograph app. Let's go and go blue.
Hey, fellow Michigan fans, this is Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender. For a decade now, you've heard me on the podcast talk about mortgages, and I've helped hundreds of fellow Michigan fans in that capacity, including Brian and Seth. But many of you don't know I'm a real estate broker as well. I promise to make buying, selling, or financing homes simple and cost-effective anywhere in the state of Michigan. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, buying a vacation home, or building a real estate investment portfolio, send me a text or give me a call. It's never too early to make a plan, and the call is always free. My number is 734-882-8194. Again, 734-882-8194. Or you can find me online at realtorandlender.com. That's realtorandlender.com. Whether you want to buy, sell, or finance a home, or even all three, I promise to provide the experience so many of you have come to expect over the years. And as always, thank you, and go blue. NMLS 1011726, Equal Housing Lender.
The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough made possible by developments in communications.
Arthur C. Clarke's 1964 vision is now reality with SignalWire, a cloud platform that enables developers to build the applications that will reshape the future of communications.
These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other wherever we may be.
You can add cutting-edge, real-time video and audio to any product, website, or application with APIs and SDKs for developers of all skill sets. SignalWire is optimized for high quality and low latency communication functionality for video, voice, and text messaging capabilities.
Almost any skill could be made independent of distance. Men will no longer commute, they will communicate.
See for yourself at signalwire.com. Use code 2021 and receive $25 in developer credit. Go to signalwire.com.
SignalWire Communications OGs, original geeks of programmable communication.
Frustrated with your current e-commerce agency? Then it's time to meet Human Element, a digital marketing and web development agency with 20 years of experience building B2B and B2C websites. See us as an extension of your team, accessible, responsive, and strategic. We work with you to understand your goals so that we can build something that drives revenue and delights your customers. So if you're looking for an agency that acts as a true partner in your e-commerce business, visit human-element.com/partner. We can't wait to work with you.
all died. I thankfully survived. Thought you'd wanna know. I still think about it often. Forgiving my regrets.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.5. I'm Seth Fisher along with Alex Drain. I want to thank Julia Rose for interstitial music. She and her band will be at the Blind Pig on October 12th. And we don't have a football game that night, so you can go enjoy that. Do we have a hockey game that night, Alex?
Yeah, we got a season starts tonight against Minnesota State. Friday-Saturday series kicking us off, and then non-conference schedule begins in order after that. It's always creeps up on me. Hockey season, it feels like it gets earlier and earlier every year, but it doesn't. It's just early October always feels early, but excited to have the team back.
Yeah, and I think, as far as Michigan hockey summers go, obviously Rucker was a big loss that they thought they were going to get back, but I don't think there were that many surprises this summer.
Not a lot of surprises. It was significant, but that's what happens. You understood. I mean, Dylan Duke maybe was a little surprising, but third-year player, he scored 26 goals, striking while the iron's hot, so to speak. Brindley wasn't that surprising. Nazer wasn't that surprising. And the Rutger one, if he had signed in April, no one would have been surprised. It's just You went through this whole song and dance where he was coming back, and then he wasn't, But anyway, those guys have all moved on. It's going to be a different kind of team this year, but I think it's going to be fun to see how they adapt, because in the past few years, they've just been able to rely on having 3, 4, 5 first-round picks that can really just overpower anybody. I think this is going to be more of a depth-focused team with being able to run more scoring lines, more experienced, older team, especially on defense, than they've had. So it'll be a little different, but I think that'll be a fun test of the coaching staff's acumen. And this is college hockey. Older team that not as much talent is a totally valid way to win. A lot of teams do it. So
I mean, we're not that old. It's not like 24-year-olds and whatnot.
No, it's still not that kind of thing, but it will be more in that vein. Up front, the big story, TJ Hughes coming back junior season. He should be probably their first line center, but they add Michael Hage, first-round pick of the Montreal Canadiens. He comes in, should be a pretty good player. I think he's one of their X factors. The other one being William Whitelaw, transfer from Wisconsin, really talented player, early third-round pick a year ago. Wasn't being utilized properly at Wisconsin. I think he should thrive at Michigan, where they have the right coaching staff to get the best out of him. They also added Evan Werner from Colorado College out of the transfer portal, and then you put him alongside guys like Josh Earnesty coming back. Jackson Hallam's back healthy, which is huge after he was injured last year. So they just have more wing depth. I mean, Garrett Shifsky's now a sophomore. He scored 16 goals for them last season. That's a really valuable piece to have back. And Nick Moldenhauer in his sophomore year, I think, should take a step forward. I don't think he was necessarily physically ready for college hockey last year, but should be a little stronger, a little more experienced. And between those guys, you have the potential to run 3 strong lines. You can go Shifsky, Hage, and Hughes down the middle and be really strong there. And I think scoring depth, being able to roll 3 scoring lines, could be a tough matchup for other Big Ten teams.
All right, so put the lines together. Who are we starting?
Well, that's what's interesting, is that it's not as clear what the sort of pairings will be, because I think it'll come down to how these guys have performed in practice and who has chemistry with whom. Again, I like the idea of going TJ Hughes, then Shifsky, then Hage down the middle, because it just can spread out the talent a little bit. But you could also load it up. I think your A-list scoring guys are Whitelaw, Hughes, Moldenhauer, Shifsky, Hage, and then maybe Humphreys, maybe Earnesty. But those are like your top 6 guys. So you could stack them all together if you wanted to and have 2 really powerful lines and then sort of a third less scoring, maybe a little more defense line. Or you could spread them out. And I kind of prefer to spread them out, but I'm not in practice. So we'll see what NAR comes up with on that front.
One thing that Rado's been doing, and you can definitely do this with the guys that they have, is kind of have a theme for each line. Like, here comes the speed line, right? Or, here, like, the Earnesty line is just going to, like, go and blow you off the puck, right? Like, you can have, and that makes you hard to match up against, right? Because, like, who's going to, like, do you completely redo your lines in order to match their speed, right? Because
they have the potential to do that. I mean, Hage is a good skater. Obviously, Hallam back. William Whitelaw is a really good skater. You could put those 3 guys together and kind of have a horses out of the barn sort of line. you can go with a bigger matchup. They don't have as many bigger forwards, but if you wanted to like promote Estapa up the line and put him with Earnesty, that could be your big bang around line. They have some flexibility, and I think the line combinations at forward will shift quite a bit during the course of the year. But one thing I think probably won't as much as their fourth line, where you could play Keenan Draper as a third line center. I prefer him fourth line center. I think he did that job really well for the team last year.
I mean, everyone in Detroit is like, come on, man.
Of course.
Just make him Chris, all right? We know what this is.
And he did a good job on the penalty kill. Their penalty kill improved over the course of last year, and he was a big part of that. So I think you can do Draper with probably Point, Estapa, Tanner Rowe is an option, and then they brought in a transfer from Miami who's an older guy, fifth-year player coming home to get a master's. Thomas Daskis. He can play on a fourth line. I think that group of guys will probably be contained to the fourth line, and you'll just be switching off there. And then your top 9 forwards are pretty clear, and then you'll probably shift them around, see what works over the course of the year. But they probably won't have as many 20-goal scorers. They might not have any 20-goal scorers. But if they have a lot of 10 to 15-goal scorers, I think they'll be in decent shape offensively, and I think they have the potential to have that kind of roster.
I think all early 2000s Wings fans hope that Daskis has a Red Wing in his ancestry, because then you can have the all Wings line. All right, defense. I mean, is this going to be the strength of the team this year?
It's hard to ever believe that defense will be the strength of a Michigan team with the way they recruit and the way they play. But I think this should be as fundamentally sound defensively of a team as they've had in recent years, because they're old and experienced. And on defense in particular, that's good. You bring in Tim Lovell from Arizona State, who is somewhat of a Seamus Casey replacement, not the same level of NHL caliber talent, but a good power play guy that can come in, run your top unit, distribute the puck. And he was an all situations defenseman for Arizona State. He played 24 minutes a night. And I think he can slide in and play with Jacob Triscott, who played with Casey, who played with Luke Hughes. He's familiar with that sort of thing. And Triscott's a fifth-year player as well. So that will be 2 very old, experienced veteran guys who played a lot of college hockey. And I think that's a good pair you can lean on. And then you have Ethan Edwards coming back. He's a senior now. Got Tyler Duke coming back. He's a junior. So you've got 4 guys that are upperclassmen on your defense, and that's good. That's what this team needed. And then you can plug in a couple talented guys. Dakota Rayon Mullen comes in as a true freshman, really young, 17 years old, 9 months. He's doesn't turn 18 until December 18th. But this is a quality player, potential first-round pick, maybe more like a second-rounder in next year's draft. But he played with the NTDP, and he's a defense-first defenseman. Good skater, but defense first. I think that will fit in well. And then you have options for that 6th spot. Maybe Luca Fantilli. I think he's more likely to be the 7th defenseman, 19th skater. Hunter Haiti is a big kid, good defensive defenseman from the Chicago Steel, 6'4". I think he could slide in potentially and play. If not, they have Will Felicio, who they flipped from Denver as a true freshman, who could come in and play. I like this defense. I think you're leaning on experience, which is good. I think you have a number of solid defensive players. The only freshmen you're playing are talented guys. This should be as solid defensively of a team as they've had in the last 5 years or so. And I think that'll be good, and I think they'll need it to help protect the goaltending as well.
Yeah, and what I like about it is they feel a lot more balanced as well. Because we've had teams in the past where it's like, okay, well, you got to play, Casey and Edwards together, and like they got 2 5'9" guys out there, right? Well, Edwards is technically listed at 6'0", but I've always considered him kind of a smaller. Yeah. Yeah,
he's not super short, but he's not the biggest guy in the world. And they have guys
big,
that. No, well, they got guys who can play both ends of the ice, and they got guys who can skate it out. Tyler Duke is not a huge offensive scorer, but he can skate with the puck. He can do a little offensive zone, but he can take it out himself. Lovell will be the same story. Dakota Rayon Mullen is that exact same story. He's a Tyler Duke sort of player in that way. And I mean, Hunter Haiti, if you have him in the lineup, would be your only guy who's not like a good skater who can really join the rush consistently. But this is a group that can do different things. They can play both ends of the ice. They're mobile enough. They will still be a little small when you got Tyler Duke out there, but that's okay. And Rio Mullen's 6 foot, Haiti's 6'4" if he's playing, so it won't be the end of the world. It won't be too much of an undersized problem.
Yeah.
And then goaltending, to tie this discussion together. Cameron Corpy comes in as a true freshman. He's joining Logan Stein, who's a grad transfer they got from Ferris State. Stein had an interesting career, talented player who was on a World Junior roster, albeit as the third string goalie, but he was still on the roster. Just never really got any help at Ferris State because Ferris State has been rough for 3 years there. He was given no help and really kind of drowned in that situation. Last year he started swimming and he didn't get any help, and yet he played really well, posted a good save percentage. I think if you had a goal save above expected sort of model, he would have graded out excellently and that kind of thing. So if he can come in and do that for Michigan, I think that he would be perfectly fine. And Corpy's a guy they like quite a bit. They've had him committed for a couple of years. Decent numbers in the USHL. That's a high-scoring league with low save percentages, so don't read too much into that. I don't know who's going to win the job. I guessed in my stupid predictions that Corpy will eventually.
Yeah. I mean, I have one piece of insider information from the hockey team, and that's Corpy is like is a little guy. Like they're not little, he's tall, but he's
right.
I know he's been committed forever, so I guess people who follow Michigan hockey have just known his name for a while. But he's kind of like a Jair Hill zone where he's young and he needs to gain some weight.
He's he's definitely a projectable goalie. I think he eventually pulls through, but it might be a year early. I don't know. I have no insider information. I'm just going off whatever. He's 6'4". He was listed on Elite Prospects as like 171 pounds. I think the roster lists him at like 165 or something, which is crazy.
It's 160. I just looked it up. Yeah.
That's not that much heavier than I am, and let's just say a lot more inches than I
am.
So
honestly, because we've been doing this for a while, and I pull them for my database every year, and they really just pull for a freshman. They just pull like what their UHSL stats were. So that was probably up. Yeah.
But he's 6'4", and Will Felicio, who they took on defense, I think is kind of like a grow at Tim level sort of guy that you're building over time. Corpy's definitely a grow and Eric Portillo kind of guy. Like it's a process, but they liked his height, they liked his length, and they like different traits about him. And we'll see if he's ready this year. If not, maybe it's something down the line. And that's why it's nice to have Stein as an insurance policy. You never like going into the year with kind of a rickety goaltender situation in the sense that neither guy is a proven star, but at the same time, they're both lottery tickets, and I think it's reasonable to expect one will pan out to at least be an average caliber goalie, and I think that would be enough for this team to get in the NCAA tournament and be a solid squad.
All right, so before we get off hockey, I want to know what the rest of the league looks like right now. Like I know we poached Wisconsin. Notre Dame's got a new coach. Like where are we at right now?
Well, so Notre Dame's new coach isn't yet. He's in training. This is Jeff Jackson's last year, and then next year the new coach takes over. But it's the transition. I honestly just grouped it into two tiers. I think there's a tier of teams that should make the tournament, and there's a tier of teams that shouldn't or don't expect to. So you got the big guys, Michigan State, who still have Trey Augustine, so have a lot of good forwards. They lost Artem Levshinov, which is a bummer for them, but a lot of other good defensemen on that.
Well, welcome back to the rich, Michigan State. That's going to happen.
Yeah, a lot of good other players on that team, and their defense should be a little older. Minnesota, talented as always. Had a weird transfer thing with Rhett Pitlick, but they brought in Matthew Wood, who's a first-round pick from UConn. They poached him out of the portal. They got Jimmy Snuggerud back. Like, it's Minnesota. They're talented. They'll be good. And then Wisconsin is going through a weird thing where they're losing their NHL guys because they don't get to play the way they want to play. And Mike Hastings is also a guy that he yells at the guys a lot, and I think some guys got tired of that. But he's a really good hockey coach. There's no question about that. He did a lot of winning at Minnesota State, and he's remaking Wisconsin into a older program of 24-year-olds who don't make mistakes. But again, you can win doing that, and they won doing that last year. I think they'll be good again this year. So I think those four teams come into the year with tournament expectations. I don't know who wins the conference, but those four have high hopes. And then you've got your other three who didn't make it last year and still feel like they're a bit of a ways off. Notre Dame was not good last year. They leaned on their goalie, and now the goalie's gone. It to me feels like this is last year they're looking to just get over with, and then they'll get the new coach in there who can steer them back into the right direction. Penn State, they're a team that needs to have a bunch of seniors to win. That's when their best years are. They don't have a bunch of seniors again this year, so it feels like they're still a little ways off. And Ohio State won 3 regulation conference games last year. So I think they're back on the upswing a bit, but you'd have to get a lot better to make the tournament coming from where they were last year. So feels like it's just kind of a rich and poor situation, not a lot of a middle class, but it's a good conference. Michigan plays a hard schedule in the non-con too. They go at BU, they go at ASU, who's a team on the rise, tough building to play in. They bring St. Cloud to Yost. They do a home-and-home with Western, and even this weekend against Minnesota State. Like, these are games you should win. You're better than them. But they're a real team, right? There's no Stonehills. There's no Linden Woods. There's no games that you just sleepwalk through. And I like that. I think it's going to challenge the team. It makes each week meaningful. I think the program of Michigan's caliber should be challenged. And it's going to be a fun year.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all we got. Final prediction, where's Michigan finish in the conference?
Let's go third. This team always sleepwalks through a few months, and then they get better at the end. So until they win it, I won't pick them to win.
All right, last question, how far the Tigers go?
I think we can beat Cleveland, and then maybe it runs out in the ALCS. That's good.
Love it. All right, thanks everybody, and thanks Alex for sticking around.
Then one day Boris was visited by demons in his head, and they said, bring me Ruski vodka or your son may soon be dead. So he went to the arena